All right, let's hope this works. Welcome in. Okay, college football playoffs, 12-team playoff, first year. I am going through my week 12 projections for how I not only think, but know and guarantee this playoff is going to go. Um, this took me way longer to work through than it should have. But I've got my bracket here with all of ESPN's projected percentage chance for the playoff on each team. These are basically all the teams that are still alive. There are a couple others that are technically still alive, but those include frauds like the LSU Tigers. So we're just going to stick with teams that actually have a realistic shot. So here is how I'm projecting the Week 12 rankings from ESPN are going to look. A couple huge upsets this week. Georgia went down. They were the number 3 team. They lost to Ole Miss. Miami, the number 4 team, they went down. They lost to Georgia Tech. So a couple big upsets. This is how I'm projecting the rankings to shake out. BYU, on the luckiest of luck, managed to beat Utah in the Holy War at the very end of the game. Nothing too crazy otherwise. Colorado continues to move up. And Indiana, probably the biggest surprise of the entire year right now, sitting there at an undefeated record and number 6 in the country. Okay, so let's just roll through. These are my key remaining games, and I kind of went through. If you haven't done this yet, I really encourage you to actually go through and try to pick how this playoff is going to look, because you think you know until you try to do it, and then you find out you don't know. But this week, biggest game of the week, College Game Day is going to be there, is going to be Tennessee at Georgia. And this is pretty much an elimination game, definitely for Georgia. Tennessee has an outside shot if they manage to lose this game, but I don't think they have the strength of record when it comes to the other teams in the SEC, so it's a must-win game for them. Clemson at Pitt, this looked like a much bigger game a few weeks ago, but both of those teams have since lost, and Clemson has an outside shot at the playoffs if a few things break their way, and they're able to get into and win the ACC championship game. And then I have Texas at Arkansas and Utah at Colorado. These are both just potential upsets. Who would have thought I'd be saying that Utah and Colorado was a potential upset, but in the favor of Utah potentially upsetting Colorado at the beginning of the year. Anyway, let's get into it. So right off the bat, I guess the easiest way to do that is go through my conference championship predictions. So I'll start in where things seem to be the easiest, and that's in the Big Ten. No big surprises here. I think that the Oregon Ducks and the Ohio State Buckeyes are going to rematch in the Big Ten championship. So that implies that I think Ohio State is going to beat Indiana in a few weeks, and I think Oregon is going to remain undefeated throughout the rest of the year. That would leave Indiana at 11-1 in my projection, and I'm also going to go ahead and call Penn State to finish 11-1. I think they actually have the easiest remaining schedule out of most of these playoff teams. Their biggest test comes on the road at Minnesota in a few weeks, which nothing's a guarantee, but other than that, their schedule isn't too difficult. So Penn State's actually sitting in a really good spot to make the 12-team playoff. They'd actually have a good chance to make the 4-team playoff as it sits right now, which is a little frustrating for Penn State fans. You constantly 10-2 every year, and the 12-team playoff is supposed to benefit them the most. But this might be the year that they actually have the best chance outside of 2016 to make the 4-team playoff. Anyway, in this Oregon and Ohio State Big Ten championship in Indianapolis, I am actually going to project the Ohio State Buckeyes to sort of get revenge on the Ducks here. They'll be playing neutral site, and they lost by 1 when they played them in Eugene. So I'm predicting Ohio State to win this game, and I'm predicting Ohio State to be the number 1 overall seed for the college football playoff. So I'm actually pretty proud of myself the way I set these little cropping images up to put it on a Google PowerPoint. But anyway, That is my first projection. I'm projecting Ohio State to be the number 1 seed this year. This is where I could be a fraud. So, in the SEC championship game, I've done a lot of research here. This is like the battle of 10-2 teams. This is the field. I just kind of threw Missouri up there just to make their fans feel a little bit better. I don't really think they have a realistic shot. They play South Carolina this week, which could be a game where they get exposed and kind of completely ruin their chances of making a playoff. They just don't have a great strength of record. Every big game that they've had, they've lost this year, which is only 2. So I think it's going to be really tough for Missouri to make the playoffs. Texas A&M, they have a shot. Losing to South Carolina a few weeks back did not help. If they can take down Texas in rivalry week, which what an amazing job college football did with this. Scheduling the rivalry between Texas and Texas A&M, renewing that rivalry and it having major consequences on the end of the season this year is such a huge win for college football, such a huge win for the 12-team playoff, such a huge win for the SEC. This is by far the biggest remaining game of the season, at least for the regular season. If anyone tells you otherwise, they are wrong. This has incredibly huge implications for how this playoff race is going to turn out. But I'm projecting Texas to hang on and win that game. I think they're going to beat Arkansas too. I think they will finish the remainder of the regular season undefeated. I think they'll finish 11-1, and I think they will clinch a spot in the SEC championship game. Who they play, that's going to be an interesting look here. Based off of tiebreakers, Ole Miss is actually who I'm going to go with. If they finish at 10-2, which I do think they will, I think they play at Florida and they also play the Egg Bowl. So there's potential for slip-ups there. But this team has looked really, really good lately. They're one of the most talented teams in all of college football. They have a top 5 roster that Lane Kiffin was able to assemble through the transfer portal. And I think now that the rumors of him going to Florida, which you can say they weren't rumors at all, if there's any type of rumor in that situation in college football, it's a distraction. So I think Ole Miss has played a different brand of football since those rumors have kind of died, and they looked really, really dominant against Georgia last week. And I think they will make it to the SEC championship, and I think they will beat Texas in the SEC championship. With how the tiebreakers go, if they finish at 10-2, and if Tennessee loses to Georgia this week, which I'm projecting Tennessee to lose to Georgia this week, this is just my prediction at the end of the day. I just think it's going to be hard for Texas to finish 12-1. They've had a pretty difficult schedule this year, and if you look at teams like Texas and Oregon coming to new conferences, these are the hardest schedules that they've played probably in their history. The Big 12 and the Pac-12 aren't as easy of conferences top to bottom as the SEC and the Big 10 are. So I'm projecting them both to slip up come the end of the season. I could totally be wrong. Both of these teams have looked great all season. So whatever, I'll eat my hat if that's the case. But I'm putting Ole Miss to beat Texas, who will finish 12-1 otherwise. And they will be the number 2 seed, finishing at 11-2. Now let's move on to the number 3 seed. This is where it gets murky, right? You have 2 conferences that are weaker than the Big 10 and the SEC, with the Big 12 and the ACC. You've had a lot of teams slip up already. The team who has not slipped up yet is the BYU Cougars, who just continue to impress and get by every week. Survive and advance is the motto out in Provo. So I think Kansas State could give them a run in the Big 12 championship game. I just don't think they're going to get there. They already have 2 conference losses, and Colorado only has 1, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm projecting that to be Colorado and BYU. What a story it would be if Colorado came in and make the playoff. I just think BYU, I think there's a chance they could slip up, but they haven't yet, so why pick against them? For now, I will put them in at the number 3 seed, getting that first round bye. Then we got the ACC. So I have Clemson up here because they have an outside shot, but they're going to need Miami to lose another conference game because Miami and SMU both hold a tiebreaker over Clemson. I'm going to be honest, if Clemson was in the conference championship, I just think with Dabo's experience there, they would be able to get it done. I just think it's pretty tough for them to get into a conference championship game in the ACC based on the tiebreakers and needing the help that they do. So I'm going to project for now the conference championship in the ACC to be Miami and SMU. And I'm going to pick SMU to win that game. I don't know why. It's kind of like how I feel about BYU. They've just answered the calls, answered the doubters, and pushed through. I could totally be wrong on there. Miami could easily get in, but I'll go with SMU for now. So now it's time to get into the fun part of the at-larges, and this is where things get a little tricky and a lot of fan bases and teams get upset. So I think it's impossible for Oregon to lose a conference championship game, have that be their only loss, and to get punished further than being the highest at-large seed. So I'm going to project the Oregon Ducks to be the 5 seed here. And this 5 seed, we're not talking about enough how overpowered this 5 seed could be. I mean, you play the weakest conference winner, which, let's face it, is not going to be strong as the winner of the Big Ten or the winner of the SEC. Not to take anything away from the ACC or SMU in this case, who's fought hard all season. But this lines up to be a very favorable matchup for Oregon. A team as strong as them, slipping up one time in a conference championship game, and then getting to host the group of 5 team, or if not the group of 5 team, the lowest ranked at-large team. This gives them a really, really good shot to go and play in the semifinals and make it to what would have been originally the 4-team playoff, which they've basically already clinched at this point if we were still going back to the old way. But I think this new way is a lot more fun. Let's just talk about all these games that have meaning now that wouldn't in the past. This field of whatever it is, 24 teams remaining that still have a realistic shot of making the playoff would be probably about 6 just a year ago. So great for college football and great for fans all across the country. Let's just go ahead and throw Boise in at the 12 seed. I think they're going to finish the regular season undefeated. They have a matchup with San Jose State, which could be a good test for them, but they've looked really good. Ashton Jeanty should be, in my opinion, the Heisman winner, if not Travis Hunter. But I'm going to throw them in at the 12 seed. And then I think if I'm projecting Texas to finish 12-1, their only loss being the conference championship to Ole Miss, they're kind of in the same boat as Oregon. I look at these two teams very similarly in a lot of ways. So I'm going to put the Texas Longhorns in at the 6th seed. Now it's a total crapshoot, right? It could be anybody. But I think the 7th seed, with how the rankings are going and my projection of how the rankings are going to look this week for ESPN's rankings, not the AP rankings, Penn State at the number 4 seed currently, with a very favorable schedule for their last 3 games, they're lining up to have a really, really good chance at finishing 11-1. And I think if they finish 11-1, it's going to be hard for a lot of teams to jump them that finish with as many or more losses. So I think Penn State is looking like a safe bet to be, at worst, the 7th seed. They're actually, I'd say, more likely to get this 6th seed because in all likelihood, my prediction of Ole Miss beating Texas in the SEC championship, it's a little flaky, right? So it's more likely that a favorite would win the SEC championship, and that would pretty much have every team in the SEC other than the conference winner finishing with at least 2 losses. So I'm putting Penn State in at the 7th seed here. They would get to host a playoff game in Happy Valley, which would be huge for that program. And they'd be on the other side of the bracket as Ohio State, which Penn State doesn't play Ohio State too well. So getting them not until a potential championship game, which I don't know if either team could make it that far. We'll kind of go through later. Would be huge for Penn State. Anyway, we will go now to our number 8 seed. This is where I'm a little disgusted with the 12-team playoff because I really have no choice based on how the rankings are looking right now and just the ease of Notre Dame's schedule. I think they're lined up perfectly to be the 8 seed, which is just disgusting to look at. No hate to Notre Dame or anything, but losing to a MAC school who looks like they're not even going to win their conference and still being able to not only make the playoff but host a home playoff game in the first round. Hats off to Notre Dame. I think a lot of things fall their way. They don't even have to they don't even have to play in a conference championship game. So the room for error, there's no excuse for Marcus Freeman and the Irish to potentially blow this and not make the playoff. Anything finishing with less than 2 losses is a huge failure for their upcoming remaining 3 games they have. Next, I'm going to go with who I think will play Notre Dame in the first round of the playoff, how it's looking right now. And I'm going to go with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, I don't want to underestimate rivalry week, but Auburn has not looked great this year. There's a chance they could pull off an upset, but it's at Alabama this year. Like I said, you never want to underestimate anything in rivalry week. Another thing, Ohio State could slip up against Michigan. The Buckeyes have not beaten Michigan since before COVID. So let that sink in. I don't think that trend is going to continue this year. Ohio State's just too dominant. Michigan's played probably the hardest schedule in the country. They've played teams at one point or currently ranked like 1, 2, 3, 6. So not a good look for how Michigan's season has gone, but I think Ohio State's going to handle them, and I think Bama is going to handle Auburn, and I think they're going to go on the road to play Notre Dame in the first round of the playoff. That leaves me with my next team, the number 10 seed. I'm going with the Georgia Bulldogs. I don't know what happened to Carson Beck, but he's got to clean it up if Georgia wants any chance of making the playoff and continuing this sort of dynasty that they've established over the past few years. But I think they'll lock in, and I think they'll win out the remainder of their schedule. They have a huge game this weekend against Tennessee, and they could lose, but I think they're going to pull it off. And I think that game is actually going to put Tennessee in a really tough spot to make the college football playoff. But we'll get into that in a bit. My number 11 seed, then, I'm going with the Indiana Hoosiers. If this little Cinderella miracle team, if they finish 11-1 with their only loss being to Ohio State, the projected number 1 team in the country, this is a huge season for Indiana, and it's impossible to leave them out of the playoff. They're basically in the same boat as Penn State. Penn State's just currently ranked higher. Their schedule really, in some ways, has been more difficult than Penn State's. So I don't think you can leave them out of the playoff. That would leave my first team out being Tennessee. I just think at 10-2 with a loss to Georgia this weekend, they could totally prove me wrong. No hate to the Volunteers or anything, but I just think they're going to be the first team out. I don't think they can be put in over a 1-loss Indiana team whose only loss is to Ohio State. That leaves me with Miami, who I think will be the next team out unless they can win their conference championship game. I also think they could slip up at Syracuse. If Miami slips up at Syracuse on the last day of the season, that will give Clemson a window to sneak into the ACC conference championship game. And I think they can win that game, and I think they could get the 4 seed if that happens. So that's why I have Clemson here. But for now, for this week, we'll continue to put Tennessee and Miami as our first 2 teams out. A few other teams I want to talk about. Texas A&M has a really good shot to get into the playoffs as an at-large team. They could even still make the SEC Conference Championship, but they have to beat Texas, which is, like I said earlier, the biggest game of the season by far for what we have remaining on our schedule. So Texas A&M is another team I want to talk about. Colorado and Kansas State, I think both have the opportunity, but I just don't want to sort of mess with this mojo that BYU's had going on. So those are two other teams. And then watch out for Washington State, man. This team has a very favorable schedule, but they've just been winning and winning, and they have potential to kind of sneak into the playoffs. Another team, Army, they play Notre Dame this week. So that's a huge game. That's kind of an elimination playoff game. The loser of that has no chance to make the playoff. So Notre Dame, kind of the most interesting team to look out for. Anyway, that's what I got for my current Week 12 college football playoff projections. So hope you enjoyed, and we'll see how wrong I am in a few weeks. But thanks for watching.